Hello and good afternoon, everybody. You are very welcome to today's webinar, Applying VSME Framework for Voluntary Sustainability Reporting in Practice. My name is Katrina Power, and I'm a Senior Executive in Enterprise Ireland's Business Expansion and Sustainability Solutions team. Please note today's webinar is being recorded, and we will share the recording and the slides afterwards. The recording will also be available to watch back on the Enterprise Ireland sustainability page on our website. We'll have time at the end for Q&A, so if you have any questions during the webinar, please pop them into the chat and we'll hopefully be able to answer them at the end. For today's webinar, I am joined by Ciara Murphy and Karen Dignan of Sustainability Works. So welcome both and thank you for supporting our Enterprise series. As the world aims for net zero emissions by 2050, the transition to a low carbon sustainable economy has become a defining force for business. For Irish businesses, this means aligning sustainability to their business strategy and decision-making processes. The regulatory environment for sustainability reporting is both expanding and shifting. With CSRD scope now narrowed, many Irish companies now sit outside mandatory EU sustainability reporting, but the sustainability information and data demands from larger customers and finance providers do remain. Voluntary sustainability reporting is becoming increasingly relevant, particularly for SMEs, and the Voluntary Sustainability Reporting Standard for SMEs offers a very clear framework to answer these requests and also to help Irish companies move beyond ad hoc disclosures to more consistent, credible reporting that supports improving their resilience and competitiveness without all the complexity and costs associated with CSRD compliance. So today we discuss the steps to apply VSME framework in practice and insights for companies looking to build in-house capability to manage their sustainability reporting. So you're all very welcome today and thank you for your time. We are delighted to host the webinar in collaboration with Sustainability Works. Sustainability Works helps organizations unlock commercial value through actionable sustainability across strategy, ESG, reporting, and implementation, working collaboratively, connecting strategy, implementation, and reporting to better decision making. I'd now like to introduce our speakers for today. Karen is a co-founder of Sustainability Works. She specializes in strategy, communications, and culture change. And over the last 20 years, she has advised many companies on best practice sustainability reporting, from large multinationals like M&S and Adidas to SMEs who are publishing a report for the first time. Prior to setting up the company, Karen worked in the UK with the Carbon Trust and with sustainability consultancies Salter Baxter and Corporate Culture. We are also joined by Ciara, and she is a fellow chartered accountant and certified sustainability and climate risk professional. Ciara previously worked with Alter Domas, EY, and the Central Bank of Ireland in senior risk advisory roles, and other experience includes KPMG, Citco Bank, and Credit Suisse. Since joining Sustainability Works, Ciara has worked with clients on double materiality assessments, CSRD, VSME, and sustainability strategy development. So you're very welcome, and I'm going to pass it over to Ciara and Karen to share their presentation, and we will take Q&A at the end. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Katrina. Thanks very much, Katrina. I'm just going to share my screen now. So welcome everybody, and thank you, Katrina. Today we're sharing research and analysis on early VSME reporting. So what's emerging and what good looks like. We remember the omnibus was announced last year, just over a year ago, and the reporting landscape, I guess, it's been moving quickly since then. Just a little reminder, the VSME was designed to help small and medium-sized companies report in a simple way, standardized manner, to meet the requirements of requests from your large customers, your banks, your investors, but also to help improve the management of any sustainability issues and overall contribute to a more sustainable economy. The VSME is a practical tool to answer stakeholder questions. It shouldn't be a compliance burden, and it's voluntary, it's flexible. The ES and G topics, which you can see here under at the end of the screen here, in the VSME, they're very similar to ESRS's, the ESRS and CSRD. So the VSME, it can be used as a stepping stone towards CSRD compliant reporting, which we've seen in the market with a couple of our clients. Um, so what we did was we looked across the market to see what publicly available VSME sustainability reports were out there. There isn't an official central repository at the moment of VSME reports. So what we did, we used kind of two main sources. So there's a CS or tool website from June 2025 that had a number of VSME reports in there. And then the rest of them we've searched through the internet and found. So that's our 13 sample. Recently, though, last month, EFRAG began formally like asking the market for copies of VSME reports with a number of submission dates up to the end of July. And their intention is to have a publication in autumn with insights and examples of these VSME reports. So that's something for you guys to look out for. So we took each of the reports and we reviewed them against the VSME framework in four key areas. So the overall reporting approach, the environmental area, the social and governance disclosures. So across four pillars. Information was extracted, we analysed it thematically, and we kind of looked at each of the disclosures and assessed them in terms of whether they were there or not, in terms of presence, the depth, the narrative versus metrics, consistency, and then that integration with strategy and risk. I guess single right VSME report, progress and honesty matter more than a polish. The next slide, then you'll see the actual sample of VSME reports that we looked at. So this is a busy slide, but you can see 13 companies. You can see the countries that they're from. So they're mostly from the countries, the Nordic countries, Germany, Switzerland, Croatia, and UK and Ireland. So one there, PJ Hegarty. And the sectors are quite varied. They're across construction, pharma, manufacturing, logistics, telecommunications, consulting, and waste. They varied a lot in size. So some companies were very small, like with 3 FTEs, up to the largest with over 460 FTEs. And then revenue again ranged from 201,000 to 571 million. It was quite a balanced sample population in terms of who used the basic and who used the comprehensive modules. So you can see that it's pretty like down the middle, 7 reported under the basic module and 6 under the comprehensive module, which is more detailed. And all of them were from FY 2024, apart from one, which was FY 2025, which is D-line. So what I will cover now are sort of the top cross-cutting highlights from the analysis performed. So report, under the comprehensive module, which is more detailed, do show higher levels of maturity generally. They include double materiality assessments, climate risk assessments, and generally disclosures that were beyond the VSME requirements. Across all of them, there was a transparency around what wasn't there. And plans then to improve disclosures in the future. So there was good transparency. Reporting approach and length varied. The lengths, there's reports there for nine, that are 9 pages long, up to the largest of 74. So really quite different in terms of size. The integration of sustainability into kind of strategy was generally high level if it was there at all. We also looked to see were any of these VSME reports included in the annual report, which CSRD will be required to. And we found that none were, and most were reporting them as standalone reports, like within it's called sustainability report, ESG report, VSME report, so various different names. Um, but one reassuring thing is how open, I guess, companies were about the gaps. Saying we don't measure this, but we plan to, and that's completely acceptable in VSME. And you can see that repeatedly actually throughout the sample. So I'll just go to the next slide, which is kind of going in a little deeper into these highlights. Materiality. So under VSME, it's not required to do a materiality assessment. There's an if applicable principle which a company can deem whether a topic is applicable to them or not. However, for the sample we looked at, 9 out of 13 had conducted materiality assessments, and 6 of those performed DMAs, and 2 of those 6 included high level impact risks and opportunities. So that was quite interesting. And materiality, doing a materiality assessment does a lot of the heavy lifting for companies because it can help SMEs justify why they're not reporting certain things, and it can stop an organization over reporting. We also found that a lot of SMEs, they're not, in investing in kind of systems. They're using what's there. Like, so there's a lot of reference to ISO standards across most of them, in fact. And we saw ratings also being used across many, and EcoVadis was kind of the standout one there for companies. Training hours then was the other area, which only 7 reported on, and 2 by gender, which is one of the things under the comprehensive um, would would be required, but it's not always information that companies have, which is also fine. So the next slide then, kind of what I've done is put the table together with the 13 different companies, and really trying to highlight on one page you can see, who, well, the basic and comprehensive reports, who's done a materiality assessment, climate targets, etc., all the way through. And here you can see, look, all the ISOs referred to, the ratings also, and who's used those. Um, Comprehensive reporters, though, use sustainability to steer decisions more, and you can see that in the way they're reporting. Whereas the basic module reporters really are focusing on completeness, so it does depend on where a company is in their sustainability and ESG journey, I guess. So next we'll show examples from the reports for the themes on materiality, strategy integration, and greenhouse gas methodology. So this is the first kind of pillar that we looked at on the overall reporting approach. And as I've alluded to before, really there is that clear divide between those that report under the basic module versus comprehensive. The basic module is more compliance oriented, whereas the comprehensive is strategically oriented. Um, Materiality then and IROs definitely is the strongest driver of quality in reports. They can translate VSME requirements into what management can actually act on. Um, as I said before, it does really help companies decide what they report on. The strategy integration is often high level, we found. Um, didn't really offer a huge amount of insight. So that's probably one area that could be improved. And then, as I mentioned, ISO standards really were used a lot, references to the UN SDGs and SBTI. We looked at greenhouse gas methodology and we found that it was reported as quite high level, but with few, it goes into a little bit more detail, and we can show you an example of that. And then the ESG ratings, multiple companies have the EcoVadis rating. So that's kind of, I think, an emerging area really when you look at ESG ratings. So I'll show you some examples from the 13 that sit across these 6 themes. So here we're really illustrating how different reporters bring the DMA and materiality to life. So on the left here, you can see use sustain. They use a matrix, nice little visual, um, uh, showing what's material to them and what's not. So out here is material, and in towards the corner is not material. But they also go on, and for a basic module, this is quite advanced, I think. They include their impacts, risks, and opportunities in this nice little visual here. So they've done it for environment. There's another box for social and governance. Now, then another style is 1023, which is the comprehensive module. They performed their DMA in 2024, their first one. So they use a narrative kind of approach, noting what their key topics were identified as a result of that. And then Alba, which is also a basic module reporter, included IROs, which wouldn't have been required. That was, but even a simple materiality exercise that organizations do can help explain to your customers, to banks, regulators, the background to your report focus. Why you're reporting um, on topics and why you're not reporting on others. So you don't need to have a complex double materiality assessment, but you do need to have something that's defensible. So once, I suppose the materiality is clear, the next question is, does it connect to your business model and strategy? And this area we found really kind of to be quite high level. It provided limited operational insight. And examples here are all from comprehensive reports, Iconic, Von Malen, and WISCA. Von Malen references circular economy, mono material packaging, and expanded supplier criteria. WISCA frames sustainability as a prerequisite for success and links it to innovation and lower impact to product development and use. But here, I suppose, short, honest links to how sustainability shows up in your business is enough at this stage, and it doesn't need to be over-engineered. So we'll move on to greenhouse gas methodology now and what examples we saw. So we have a mix of basic and comprehensive reporting here. On the left, Alba and Use Sustain referred to activity-based methodology or location market-based methodology from Use Sustain, whereas Iconic goes further. It refers to a system it's based on, Salesforce Net Zero Cloud Framework. Says it's in line with the Greenhouse Gas Protocol, and it gives preference to some available sources, and they list the sources there. But one of them is, Probas database, the German Environment Agency. So that is a lot more detail there. You can see the differences. Um, but most SMEs are using simple standard approaches, activity-based, location market-based. So I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Karen now, who is going to talk through the environment disclosures and what we've found here.
Brilliant. Thanks, Kira, and hello, everyone. So following the same kind of approach, what we've done is pull together some of the themes and things that we noticed about how people were disclosing information on the environmental topics within their VSME reports. And then we have some snippets from the different reports to kind of show you how people brought it to life. There was definitely kind of more detail in all cases on some of the environmental topics than others. So these ones here around energy and emissions and waste were probably the ones that had the most detailed reporting, with water and some of the ones we'll talk about on the next slide, pollution, etc., a bit less so. So for energy and greenhouse gas emissions, most reporters were reporting their scope 1 and 2 emissions at least. And as we know, that's kind of the minimum with regards to emissions that a company, even an SME, should be reporting. They are the ones more within your control. And some included scope 3 where that information was available. The VSME doesn't require you to provide that in the basic module anyway. It's optional if you want to be more comprehensive. Some did disclose reduction targets if they had set them, and Kira referenced science-based targets initiatives. So some of the larger SMEs had set science-based targets, and if so, they referenced that, but not all had set targets. They were at least measuring their emissions. People were disclosing their energy usage by type. And in the VSME, there is a disclosure around kind of an intensity measure of your emissions, which is your total carbon footprint as a unit of your turnover or revenue. And then if people were using carbon offsets, they were transparent about that, but only a small number of reporters mentioned offsetting. With regards to water, there was kind of tracking of water consumption and companies reporting on that. Several reported that water was not material or said that they weren't measuring their water usage now, but they had plans to do so in future. And they would have included information about initiatives that they had in place to reduce water usage. So water-based water kind of reporting, definitely less mature than energy and emissions, but still included by some companies where it was relevant. Onto waste management and circular economy. People reported the sort of volume or quantification of waste and by type, so hazardous or non-hazardous waste. They also disclosed kind of things like recycling rates and other circular economy type metrics. And they commented or reported on sustainable procurement, their use of eco-friendly materials or packaging. And in one case, they talked about a scheme that they were involved in, which was around offsetting kind of plastic usage. In some cases, people were reporting kind of trends year on year, which is great to see because then you can see the pattern of whether waste is increasing or decreasing. Then these topics were a bit less reported, if you like. Pollution was definitely less frequently reported because I guess for some companies it's not felt to be applicable. When it was included, the focus was on things like chemical use or perhaps site level assessments for pollution risk. Biodiversity was reported in a relatively basic way by these VSMEs. They talked about, land use, or whether they were adjacent or on kind of sensitive sites for biodiversity. And if they were involved in any biodiversity related projects or partnerships, they would disclose those too. Finally, on to climate risk. It was interesting to see that several of the companies had performed a basic qualitative climate risk assessment. Most of them considered their exposure to physical climate risk to be quite low. One company mentioned that they plan to conduct a climate risk assessment in future, and another plans to publish a climate transition plan in 2027. So climate risk was seen to be a kind of at a fairly basic level right now, but kind of maturing. So on to some of the snippets from the reports to give you a flavour of what this looked like. And again, as with the other topics that Kira showed, you can see the difference between the basic level reporters and the more comprehensive ones, with 1023 breaking out their kind of energy data in a bit more granular detail, and the others keeping it simple and just to the kind of minimum VSME is asking for. Onto their greenhouse gas emissions. So from the basic Nord Mobile there at the top, giving kind of an overall carbon footprint for their scope 1 and 2 emissions, and a reference to their scope 3 as well. So a comprehensive picture, but presented in quite a simple way with just the overall numbers, versus 1023 and Iconic, who give more of a table breakdown or use a graph to kind of show the breakdown of scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. And in the case of 1023, breaking out the scope 3 categories as well. So all of these companies will definitely have done, a good carbon footprinting exercise behind the scenes, and some of them in a very comprehensive way. Looking at the question of targets and whether they had set targets and whether they disclosed those as part of their report. Again, you can see some examples here. So 1023 had set science-based targets, so they disclosed those. And others like Von Malen and Wiska talking about their targets, and in the case of Von Malen, splitting it out across the different scopes of emissions as to what their midterm and long-term target are. So quite comprehensive from those who are actually disclosing targets, the information that they've included. Looking at that greenhouse gas intensity metric. So again, this is something that you have the option to disclose. If you're happy to disclose your turnover, then coming up with this figure is a simple division. In the case of Wiska, you can see that they are showing it over a number of years. And I suppose this is giving reassurance that they are gradually kind of reducing their emissions per euro or per unit of revenue. The other more basic examples, just kind of giving the number, and that's it. And we mentioned offsetting. So 1023 talked about their carbon offsetting and what they're doing around that. It's mostly descriptive, but then they have a little table there as well that shows kind of where exactly they have invested and what the carbon equivalent is that they have offset. So again, that's quite a comprehensive disclosure around their offsetting. Looking at water, as we said, this one was reported in a relatively basic way. It tends to be a topic that might not be material or very relevant for all companies, but for those that did list it as being applicable, these are the kinds of ways they were providing the information. So some nice visuals from like Wiska there, across two kind of basic tables from D-Line, and a mix of kind of data and a description from 1023. This is another one where they kind of showed where water consumption fell on their materiality matrix, and just talked about how they are going to be able to report on a more accurate basis on water consumption and electricity usage, etc., in the coming years, having moved to a new office building where there's a better kind of building management system in place that will enable them to do that. So often in these reports, you might not be able to provide the information this year, but you can give a nod to the fact that you'll be able to provide it in future. The waste disclosures were quite good across the reports that we looked at, with people kind of often breaking down their kind of waste into different elements and providing a breakdown of the tonnage of waste of different types, as you can see there from Iconic. Whiska providing a more kind of graphic visualization with their pie chart and graphs. And yeah, overall, this was quite a strong area of reporting. Some more here where you can see that 1023 are showing that trend over time. So reporting their 22, 23, and 24 waste stats, same with Von Malen and same with Whiska. So, or sorry, PJ Hegarty it is down there on the bottom. So being able to show that trend is really strong. Pollution, this was very light in most cases because it was not always applicable. So it tended to be just narrative disclosure where it was relevant and included, without getting into too much detail. And on to biodiversity, quite basic metrics here around, the where your business is situated and whether it's next to a biodiverse sensitive kind of area, or looking at kind of land use and the nature of that land use. So I think the biodiversity kind of reporting is at a fairly nascent level for these SMEs. Here they're talking about kind of biodiversity related partnerships or projects that they're involved in, which is good to see. And then finally, the climate risk piece. So a mix here, quite good in terms of, showing that they have done a qualitative climate risk assessment, and some saying that they plan to do a more comprehensive job, in the next year. And then I think in one case, yes, the next one, thanks, Ciara. This is from PJ Hegarty's report. They had kind of used some of the referenced the TCFD framework and talk about physical risks and transition risks, and show a clear kind of risk rating here. So, this type of exercise, doing a climate risk assessment at a qualitative level, is not difficult for companies to do, and there's good guidance on how to approach it. But including it in your report is a great addition. Ciara, you're still on mute there.
Thanks, Karen. So moving swiftly onto social disclosures. So workforce composition, many reported headcount, contract type, whether it was permanent or temporary, nationalities, age distribution, gender balance was frequently reported, and sometimes split down at different management levels, and some also tracked participation in wellness programs or special leaves. But so just before I probably go into the rest of all of this, social data is probably the easiest really for SMEs, or like a lot of this data HR have it. And the difference we saw isn't whether data existed, but like how it was presented. So the employee turnover, some reported turnover rates, not all, and there was also strategies to reduce attrition there as well. Training and development then was common to report training hours per employee. Some included it by gender, which is kind of alluded to in the comprehensive module, but it is one of the areas that companies don't always have that information by gender. There were some very few, I suppose, talked about growth plans, individual growth plans, leadership development, kind of giving more detail as a type of training that employees were getting. Health and safety then was pretty standard, was same type of reporting around number of accidents, fatalities, lost time due to injury, and then some, disclosed policies related to health and safety. Remuneration, many talked about their remuneration with respect to the minimum wage. And then some went a step further and referred to bonuses, gender pay gaps, collective bargaining coverage, and employee ownership. So there's probably there's a kind of a mix here between narrative and tables. And we'll go through some snippets here. So here again, you can see, and you're probably, as we're going through this, you can kind of see the styles, like 1023 likes to go for tables with year to year sort of trend information. And then there's the visual, which tends to be used by some of the basic reporters. And quite simple here. You can see Alba has a gender distribution and age distribution here in the lower visual. I guess if you're using a table, it can facilitate repeatability and comparability year on year. So that's one advantage. So here, gender workforce composition and diversity. So again, WISCA, likes to use the visuals. It's very simple. Male-female ratio, where Van Malen goes into the more detail. It's also a comprehensive report and gives a bit more information. U-Sustain uses the type of contract, the gender distribution, and the country. So there's your location. They're all in Norway. There's only 3 of them, so that was an easy one for them to do. Employee turnover and retention, very simple. Again, from WISCA and 1023 comprehensive, giving that year by year table format. And I guess, when your turnover is disclosed, it is can be strongly linked to workforce planning, which is good to report on. Training and development then, again here, the average number, very simple reporting here, U-Sustain saying, on average annual training hours is 20. Iconic goes a step further and splits it between male and female average hours, and Van Malen then the type of training that employees undertook on average. So, the comprehensive adding again more depth. So health and safety, these disclosures tend to be quite straightforward. As I said, the number of incidents, sort of basic metrics. The stakeholders want to see here that there's awareness, there's controls, there's no surprise, and the consistency over time is valuable. Stakeholders here are looking for trend and preventions narrative. So again, WISCA going for a simple visual with more comprehensive reporting coming from Van Malen and 1023. So with remuneration, I mentioned the reference to the minimum wage, which most do here. You can see it with Van Malen. Also kind of reference to the gender pay gap, which Iconic use as well as collective bargaining coverage. PJ Hargity's one here goes a step further, reporting. It's probably the only one that kind of went to this level of reporting by bonus, the bonus by gender, benefit in kind, and pay quartiles by gender. And then onto governance, which is our fourth area that we looked at. And governance is a smaller topic area than the others. So human rights was there on all of them. Where the UNGC principles or UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights was referred to. Suppliers' code of conduct. They're often referred to and saying they're aligned with human rights. And some were assessing risks in their supply chain. So supplier codes of conduct were important. Anti-corruption and bribery is another core area in governance. And this is pretty standard. Most companies track convictions, fines, incidents. So the reporting of that is similar for all. And the codes of conduct here are important also. And then when it came to gender at board and management, some were reporting at the board level and management level. But again, clarity here kind of beats any complexity. So here is a Connick and von Malen reporting human rights, and these are actually laid out in the VSME standard. The child labour, forced labour, trafficking in human beings, etc. So this is standard and it's easy to report on. So you can see Van Malen's actually gone that step further and said whether it's covered in a policy or code of conduct, which is good. That link to the code of conduct is important. Anti-corruption and bribery, again, standard enough. So you've got your table format there with Van Malen, whereas the basic GP Coland is using it as a narrative, saying that it maintained an impeccable record free from convictions, fines, or breaches of anti-corruption and anti-bribery. They all have 0. And then the board and management gender, so some disclosed gender ratios at a board level here, Van Malen, others at a management level, Whiska, and also here Iconic is reporting at a management level, but also kind of talks about the importance at management levels as well, and what it strives to to achieve in the promote in the long term through equal development opportunities, transparent selection process, etc. So now I'm going to hand you back to Karen, who will talk about these sustainability must-haves for SMEs.
Thanks, Ciara. Great. So hopefully what we've covered so far has given you a good flavor of, how other companies have been reporting using the VSME. But of course, to be able to report all of that information and what you're doing, you have to be doing the work behind the scenes. So the reporting is really the output of all the work that's happening within the company on managing various E, S, and G kind of topics or issues. So, it's important to remember that there are sort of key things that an SME should try and have in place, and in order to make the reporting and disclosure simpler. And they include having a core set of ESG policies, because the VSME will ask, do you have policies on all of these topics? How are you managing these topics, etc.? So your kind of policy and approach. In addition to that, it is really helpful to have a clear strategy, just a simple kind of plan on a page, and of course more detailed actions behind that, because then you can report for each of the topics the work that you're actually doing now, what you've achieved this year, what you plan to do next. So giving a sense of momentum and the fact that you have an intentional kind of structured approach to managing ESG topics through this strategy, and that you're making kind of intentional actions, prioritizing certain things over others, and being very strategic about it. You obviously, in order to be able to report the metrics that VSME asks for, need to be collecting that data from across the business on at least an annual basis, but ideally more regularly than that, so you can use it just for kind of management decision making too. So those are our three kind of core must-haves. And then to kind of give additional credibility to the work that you're doing, having standards like ISO 14001 or other ISOs or other certifications in place is really good. And those should be mentioned in your report, as can ratings like EcoVadis, or if you're a B2C type company, other relevant eco labels, all kind of boost your credibility and show that you have kind of third party endorsement of the things that you're doing. So just to flick on to the next slide, Kira, we've pulled together a list of kind of some of those core policies that SMEs should have in place. Hopefully most of you on the call will be able to look down through this list and say tick, tick, tick. But if not, it's a good checklist. And we also wanted to point you to some really helpful resources from the IVCA, the Irish Venture Capital Association, who have a set of templates for these types of policies that SMEs can use and adapt for their own kind of purposes. But that gives you a good starting point if there are any of these policies that you're missing. In terms of a strategy, it can sound kind of grand, and it does need to be kind of, thought through, but it can also be like a relatively simple plan on a page, like this example from PJ Hegarty, which is in their VSME report. The usual kind of thing that you'd see where they have identified 3 pillars: people, planet, product. And within each of those, they have a number of focus areas, the bullet points there, that they are focusing on. And then sitting behind this will be an action plan with a list of things that they are doing now on each of these topics and a list of things that they plan to do in the future. There's another example on the next slide from the WISCA report. Not as colourful, but kind of conveying the same thing. Their 3 pillars, you can see there: environment, employees, and then overall corporate responsibility. And again, the kind of bullet point focus areas that they include beneath that. I always think that it's really helpful to show something like this at the start of your sustainability report. It really shows that you have kind of thought about things, that you're approaching sustainability in a structured way, and that you know what you're doing. So being able to kind of depict your plan on a page or your strategy in a simple kind of visual like this is really good. And then behind it, in terms of doing the actual work, you'll have your own kind of action plans internally. Developing something like that to be able to show it in your sustainability report is not difficult. There's a simple kind of 3-step approach that we typically take. Discover is all about capturing what you're already doing, which is really important. Understanding the expectations of your stakeholders and what's going on in your industry. Definitely looking at what your peers and leaders in your sector are doing, because from that you get a sense of what topics are being talked about the most, and that helps you to do that materiality assessment and understand which topics are relevant or applicable to your business, and those are the ones that you should include in your VSME report. The topics listed in VSME are a good checklist, but you'll be able go down through them and understand whether things like water pollution are definitely material for you or not. Once you've kind of understood all of that, then you can pull together a simple strategy on a page with those pillars and focus areas and have an action plan sitting behind it. And then it's a matter of putting in place the coordination internally to deliver on it. sustainability touches on lots of different parts of an organization. So you might need to pull together a group of people from across the business to just coordinate efforts. It depends how big your company is. But some kind of working group or committee with somebody centrally coordinating things just to keep on pushing those actions along in each area and make sure that the data is being gathered so that you can report each year in your VSME report. So I suppose that's how the kind of strategy and reporting piece come together. Ciara, back to you just to give us final few thoughts on VSME. Just turn off your mute again.
Thanks, Karen. Yeah, I guess, look, VSME reporting, it's not about being perfect, it's about being credible. And the companies that came across the strongest are the ones that focus on what really matters to them. You know, they're honest about where there are gaps and they show a clear path forward. And I think starting with what's material, what's relevant, being transparent about gaps and showing progress, that's what stakeholders want. Um, yeah, and for SMEs especially, like proportionate, transparent, reporting builds trust quickly, with your customers, with the banks and with the regulators. So that's it from me. I'll hand you back to Katrina now.
Thank you so much, Ciara and Karen, for all the work that you put into this fabulous presentation today. I think it really gave a practical overview of what type of information goes into VSME reporting and helping to simplify that for the audience. We have a number of questions that have come in. 2 have been answered already. So I'll start with this one. How should SMEs approach gender pay gap disclosure under VSME when workforce sizes are small and simple percentage may not reflect role mix or seniority patterns?
I think that's a common challenge that both large and small companies face, where gender pay gap and how you calculate that is based on specific way of doing it, but I think it just requires a good narrative to go alongside the data to kind of explain the context for why this number is as it is, and just to explain the different factors within your business that are contributing to it. So narrative and explanation and commentary around the data is as important as the number itself because it will help the reader to understand. I think that's my take on it. Ciara, any other thoughts?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. But I suppose also to make the point that, anything that is reported under VSME is voluntary, and there is flexibility there. So just to bear that in mind, even if you don't have it's okay as well, and it's okay to say that, and maybe you can, refer to a plan to have it in the future. But I understand there is complexities depending on the organizations.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you, Ciara. Thank you, Karen. Next question. Hi there. Is data from Excel spreadsheets with fuel usage, water, electricity, raw materials? We love a spreadsheet, don't we? We all have one. Added to EcoVadis, a valid way of reporting the data?
Is it? Yeah, I mean, listen, we've worked with all types of companies, and yes, Excel is used, extensively. I don't think we can get away from it. And I think it is fine if that's what you have, and it also depends on your teams as well, and what systems you have. As long as you have proper controls around how you use the Excel spreadsheet, who has access to it, um, making sure that the data in those spreadsheets is accurate and complete is really important. So the controls around the data, I think that's where the focus should be. Whether you're using the Excel spreadsheet or not, it isn't a problem as long as it's the right data.
Yes, exactly.
So
Great, thank
hopefully
you.
that answers your question.
What verification is advised for SMEs for the VSME reporting?
Verification. So there is no, for VSME, there is no requirement like if you look at CSRD, there are limited assurances required. That will be required if you're reporting under CSRD. VSME, there is no requirement for that, for a verification or a validation. Um, those companies that are using VSME as a stepping stone to CSRD they are looking at the data that's been included in VSV and looking to see, well, what sort of verification is being done on the data here? Is it, is internal audit looking at this information, or do we get a third party, like with the energy data and the greenhouse gas calculations? There's many third parties involved in the calculations and the validations of those. And that certainly gives audit committees a lot of assurance and it helps them get comfortable that whatever data is reported has had some sort of internal or external verification. I think that even though it's not required to have verification or assurance, I guess it is information that if you're putting out publicly that you want to be comfortable with what has been reported that is correct. So there are many different ways of doing that. And it can, if you have an internal audit person, that could be a good source, or have a third party do some sort of review. But I think it depends on how you're going to use your VSME report. If it's not going to be public, then it's a different situation.
Yeah.
Yes, versus
And I
if it's a
just,
customer requirement, a policy requirement, whatever it might be. Yeah.
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 And I think, some types of data and data on certain kind of topics is more straightforward than others, isn't it? So like for a lot of companies, reporting on greenhouse gas emissions might be a kind of a relatively new thing. And so maybe that might be an area where they do decide it's worth getting a third party expert to kind of have a look at this data, even if they've gathered it themselves, to actually just sense check it, ensure it's accurate so that, as Kira said, they feel comfortable publishing it. So we've had a number of kind of small businesses we've worked with who have taken that approach. That is definitely one area I think where it can be worth getting your data sense checked by an expert.
Thank you. A question from Ashkay. Can you please share the link to the template you mentioned that can help SMEs to map better? I think that was the IVCA link, was it?
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
think
yeah.
maybe that is. I shared it, I think, in an answer to one of the other
Okay,
questions. Yeah.
great. Super. Thank you. Another question, but I think we've already answered it. Where would the sustainability report be disclosed? Would it be on a website or
Yeah.
elsewhere? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on a website typically, isn't it, Kira? And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes
Yeah.
people have like you
Or
tend
links.
if you're big, some people might have like sustainability kind of page on their website that's called out in the navigation, and then a link to the report would sit on there, and there might be some narrative describing their
Mhm,
different kind of sustainability related activities. Other
mhm,
times you might see it in more like the About Us page, and it would be just
mm.
one section of that, and it might be included in there.
Yeah, most of and you'll see in the slides that you'll have access to the links for each of the 13 reports will bring you to the websites of those companies where you can go in and you can download the copy. That's how they're presented. You can download a copy of their reports, the VSME reports, or yeah, but they're in their websites. That's where most of them will be published.
Yes, the presentation will be available afterwards to all attendees, and I actually consider it a tool, for the attendees of this webinar as well. It will be very useful. Thank you.
Mhm.
There's a question coming up here on sustainable procurement. If you're doing a strategy for sustainable procurement in isolation, would you still recommend aligning to VSME requirements, or what do you recommend starting from scratch at the moment?
Mm.
Okay. So I guess this, if I'm interpreting the question correctly, this is the company wanting to put in place their own sustainable procurement strategy to make sure that when they're buying in goods and services, they're thinking about kind of the ESG angle. Um, Kira, there's not detailed kind of requirements or disclosure requirements around sustainable procurement in VSME. Sure, there isn't. But
No,
I
there
suppose
isn't.
what the VSME gives you is it gives you a starting point as to, well, what are the questions and the topics that we should be asking our suppliers about? And they are the same topics that are in the VSME in terms of, asking your suppliers, well, what are they doing about environmental issues? Are they measuring their greenhouse gas emissions and can they share that information with you? Do they have options around kind of waste and circular economy initiatives that might benefit you, etc. So I think it's a useful reference point, but there are probably other kind of helpful guides and things when it comes to actually setting up a sustainable procurement approach. Feel
Mm.
free to reach out to us. Was it Patrick who asked that? Whoever asked the question, and we can share more information.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Just linking back a little bit to the verification piece, will banks look for verification for green finance? Yeah.
Yes,
I
yes,
would say so,
so
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Okay. That's pretty short and sweet. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and actually, as Kira might have said at the
Mhm.
outset, the VSME, that was one of the things that it was designed to help SMEs with, was like if you are getting questions from your bank or from your investors, then having the information that the VSME asks for should satisfy most of their questions. And I think if you're getting green finance, your bank would definitely ask you for some of this type of information.
Absolutely. Okay, next question. I know we're a little bit over time, everyone. We're 2 minutes over. I hope that's okay. But we've had a lot of questions in for this session, which is really good to hear the appetite. And obviously, there's a lot of people thinking about this right now. Where do you see demand or the imperative for reporting being sought within the life cycle stages, or what companies or industry sector are seeking carbon sustainability credentials from their suppliers? Where is the most demand for these types of services and why? Hmm?
Well, that's a great
So,
question. We could
great
just have a
question.
good old chat for half an hour about that, Patrick. Um, um, where do we see it? I mean, I think there are a lot of asks coming from large corporates down to their supply chain. And so as SMEs, you might be receiving some of these sustainability questionnaires from like large corporates who you supply into. Um, in terms of industry sectors, I think there are some sectors that are really kind of hot on all of this. Construction and real estate is certainly one where we see a lot of activity, and a lot of things coming down from either large corporate clients, but also public sector procurement, where you have the likes of Irish Rail or Transport Infrastructure Ireland or those kinds of organizations, the kind of public sector organizations that are yeah, procuring goods and services. They are definitely asking a lot more detailed questions. Kira, other sectors where we're seeing it a lot beyond kind of construction,
Um,
food and drink, maybe,
yeah, food and drink.
healthcare.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the sectors where, sustainability and kind of climate risk and greenhouse gas emissions is a really material kind of topic and something that is kind of, competitive advantage if you're doing it well or puts you on the back foot if you're not. Any of those sectors for where these topics are really tangible and starting to hit the bottom line,
Mm-hmm.
that's where we're starting to see a lot of demand.
Mm-hmm.
Very informative. Thank you. One last question from Catherine. Have you seen any of the companies you looked at put a figure on social value, whether in a VSME report or elsewhere? That's a really good question.
Mm.
I
Kira,
have
did you see that?
I haven't seen anything, Karen, have you?
No, and I think it's an emerging area, kind of
Yeah.
social value measurement and reporting,
Mhm.
especially in Ireland. It's quite a bit more advanced in the UK because they have regulation around it.
Mhm.
And for example, if you're in the construction industry, there are certain things around social value that you're required to do, but it's a bit more in its infancy here in terms of what you would see in reports from Irish-based businesses. But I do think it's an emerging area. We didn't see any particular social value figure in any of the reports that we did. So if it's something
No.
you're thinking about, Catherine, I think if you were able to do that, you would be at the cutting edge of, social value reporting in Ireland.
Wow. That's a nice thing to put out there, Karen. Very good. Great stuff. Thank you so much to Karen and Kira for today. What I'm going to do next is I'm just going to share some slides from Enterprise Ireland in terms of how to, I suppose, when you're thinking about those sustainability must-haves, whether that's the policies, developing a sustainability plan, looking maybe at those certifications like ISO 14001, 50001, whatever it might be, SBTI targets, we have supports to help you do that. So I'm just going to share my screen pretty quickly. Yeah,
Mhm.
okay. So here we go. Hopefully many of you are familiar, but just as a recap, Enterprise Ireland has a suite of sustainability offers, helping our clientele to understand how to navigate sustainability, whether they're at the start of their journey or perhaps they might be more mature in terms of decarbonisation and seeking capital for that. So for example, there's things like here, such as the Climate Toolkit for Business, that can help a company quantify their carbon emissions, scope 1, 2, and 3. Now it's been updated. We have support such as Climate Action Voucher, Green Start, which can be used to hire a consultant to help you with any of those types of activities to support your VSME reports that was highlighted today, or even help you build out that VSME report if you haven't started it already. The Green Plus grant that we have available is for training. So if you want to train up your team with the capability and skills to be able to gather all that data from across the business for your VSME reporting, this is a great opportunity to start those training projects and to utilize the supports available. And then, of course, for other types of supports, we have the utility metering and things like that. If you're looking to track water usage internally or energy usage, you can use the metering grants, or D&I if you're using new product development. And there's the capital supports for decarbonisation on site. But I think the most relevant for today are the consultancy and the training supports, just to highlight those in the context of building up your capability for VSME reporting. And we often see these grants used for these types of activities. As I mentioned, whether it's around developing a sustainability plan, whether it's about doing a double materiality assessment, as looking at sustainable procurement, for example, to the person who asked the question earlier, looking at, embedding and building up the capability to do environmental or energy management systems training with the ISO standards and things like that. So a lot of employee engagement, the social value of sustainability as well, all these supports available can help with that type of activity. So the next in our series of the Sustainable Enterprise series, we're going to be talking about thriving in a changing climate. That's on next week, managing climate risk for your business. And I think someone commented or in the chat earlier about how climate risk is now going to be included in the ISO 14001. So actually, this is probably a good time to kind of tune into that webinar and to
Mhm.
learn about how to address climate risk in your business and how to, to look at that. Green finance is coming up on 29th of April. And then on the 6th of May, strategies for responsible and transparent sustainability communications. Of course, if you have any questions, you're always welcome to reach out to our email inbox there, and we will be in touch if there's any more webinars coming up, and we'll make sure to keep you all reminded of those as well. So thank you very much to our speakers, and thank you for joining today. Really appreciate your time. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks.